If you are here, you have taken an active role in bettering your life, no matter what stage of life you are in. The Banyan Treatment Center's podcast will discuss many topics like recovery, addiction, self-help, mental health, and so much more. It will provide you with tools to succeed, ideas for recovering, and how-tos on creating a better life. My name is Alyssa, and today's episode is about managing relationships in recovery. Today on our panel, we have Ashley Bonner, LCSW and Clinical Director of Banyan Pompano, and Abigail Dorfman, our resident podcast guest, with lovely advice about all things recovery. Thank you, ladies, for joining me, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves a little bit more?
My name is Ashley Bonner, and I, as you said, am the Clinical Director over at Banyan Pompano. I've worked for the company for about 4, almost 5 years now, and I'd love to talk all things recovery.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Abigail Dorfman. I am also an employee of Banyan Treatment Centers. My credentials are that I have over 5 years clean. So I am in recovery, and I have experienced love, loss, and relationships in recovery.
As Valentine's Day approaches and the conversation about love and intimacy is constantly brought up, some may rarely consider the unique dynamic of romantic relationships with people in recovery. Finding love or just dating in recovery can be difficult and sometimes dangerous, depending on how you approach a situation. Learning ways to maintain a healthy relationship is vital for couples who have a history of addiction or mental illness. Dating while in recovery or dating someone in recovery can be a scary process, but with the right information, you can establish great relationships and find healthy romantic partners. Listen in as we give useful tips that you can apply to your dating life so you can also have a positive Valentine's Day. When is it the right time for someone in recovery to seek a romantic relationship? Ashley, you want to start?
Sure. I know it is typically recommended to wait that first year, but the answer is different for everyone. I can tell you personally, I'm in recovery as well. I almost have 6 years, and I did not listen to that suggestion. And it ended exactly how my sponsor said it was going to.
So why do you think that people say a year? Like, what are some of the reasons as to why they say wait?
So I believe that they say a year because when we're first getting clean, even when the drugs leave our physical body, our brains are still trying to figure their way back,
right?
And the reality is what our drug addiction feeds, what the physical bio of our drug addiction feeds off of is brain chemicals, right? And that's exactly what being in a relationship is. You're dealing with dopamine, you're dealing with oxytocin, like all of those really strong emotions that us as addicts crave. It's like this rush. And so we're not used to dealing with any of those strong emotions. So the suggestion, wait a year, is to let yourself be human again. And also to just sort of build your own identity again. And not get lost in, I am so-and-so's partner.
Right.
Or their identity, or their version of recovery. It's to sort of allow yourself to just be that first year. I suggest longer than a year. I wish that I had taken that suggestion. But a year is, get a solid year under your belt, and then people are a little bit more supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see a lot of people just transitioning their type of addiction, right?
Yes,
They're
absolutely.
so used to using drugs and alcohol in such a toxic and unhealthy way, and now they start dating someone, and that person becomes their drug, and that person becomes their toxic addiction, and you see how unhealthy that relationship is. But, let's face it, the biggest reason why is because, just like you said, we don't know how to deal with emotions. So what if that relationship doesn't end well? What was your coping mechanism before?
Getting high.
What do you think it's going to be in that moment if
Right.
you haven't had the chance to build positive coping skills yet, to learn new positive coping skills?
Right.
You've heard everyone in this room say, I wish I had taken the suggestion. Let's learn from us. Take this suggestion, and hopefully we'll spare you from some heartache, right? How does someone in recovery know they are or are not ready for a relationship or to date?
I don't know if you ever know when you're ready. like you were saying, the year, focus on yourself. You know, when we decide to get sober, we're clearly not, you know, in the best state of mind. So it was told to me that water seeks its own level. So if I am unhealthy, I am going to attract unhealthy partners.
Right.
If I allow myself to heal, hopefully I will attract healthy partners.
Right. That's so true. The stronger you are on the inside, you're really able to identify what you deserve, you know, what's good for you, what's not good for you. When you've been living a life doing all of these bad things to yourself, you know, it's very hard to identify what's good for you and what's not good for you.
You know, in terms of being ready, I knew I wasn't ready for a very long time. You know, going back to waiting a year, I did not take that suggestion. And because of that, I got my feelings hurt. And I think from that, I learned how to have friends. That was the first relationship that I needed to learn, to have healthy, loving, non-transactional, nothing with ulterior motives, pure friendships. I needed to learn how to have that. And I needed to learn also how to show up for myself. Like when I could sit with myself and not feel this desperate urge to escape my own skin, it felt more realistic for me to share myself with a partner and not be someone's, like, you know, I want it to be, this is very cliche, but this is just my experience. I knew I was ready when I felt like a whole person and not like someone missing their other half. And I think that us as addicts, like, you can identify with that feeling.
Yeah.
And you know it when you get into a relationship and you start to lose your sense of self. And you're like, well, maybe I wasn't ready. So I think it's like, it's very similar to what Ashley said, where you don't know if you're ever ready.
Right.
You learn from the relationships that you have sober, what you could have done different, what you felt was unacceptable behavior, and you bring that into the next relationship. You know, I don't think that you wake up one day and you're like, today's the day. I'm getting into a relationship. It's definitely a process.
Yeah. Something you just said kind of sparked something in my mind. It's so true. It's like, you're never going to be like perfect. It's not going to be like one day, okay, I know I'm ready. I'm perfect now. Like, I can have a perfect relationship. You're going to try to have a new relationship. You might see yourself falling into those old habits of making them your identity. But you're smart enough to recognize that you're doing that. And you're taking the time out to continue spending time with your friends and spending time doing your hobbies and making sure that you're not losing yourself in this relationship where maybe through active addiction or your unhealthy years, that was not even a thought in your mind, you know, like they were the end all be all and there was no coming back from that. So I think also just recognizing that there's change is a sign of growth. And then that's how you grow in your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is a romantic relationship detrimental to someone in early recovery, would you say? Is that too dramatic of us to say? And what are some of the pitfalls of dating in early recovery?
I think that goes back to what I said before. You know, when we're not healthy, we are attracted to unhealthy people.
Yes.
You know, and if my focus needs to be on my mental health or, you know, recovery from drug and alcohol addiction, I'm getting sidetracked now with this partner, right?
Yep.
And, you know, for me specifically in early recovery, I started skipping meetings to hang out with this person or that person. And it's definitely started to affect me in a negative way. You know, all those old behaviors started to come up. Thankfully, I had made those friendships where they pointed it out to me. And then I, too, you know, got my feelings hurt. But at that point, I had learned at least a little bit of how to cope with that.
Right.
You know, and I had that support system, thankfully, because I don't know what would have happened, you know, if I didn't have that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to have those people there to help call you out. That's all part of recovery in general and why community is so important. You know, people say, why do I have to go to all of these meetings? Like, it's about hearing what you hear in the meetings, but it's also about meeting people. It's about building those connections and having all of that love around you to pick you up when you've fallen down, because you know what it's like to be alone and not have anybody there supporting you that understands you.
So I think that Ashley hit a lot of important points about, first of all, in early recovery, we are probably not the healthiest version of ourselves, nor are we with someone else's healthiest version of themselves. I remember,
That too.
yeah, I remember when I was in treatment, a therapist said that dating in early recovery from the pool of other early recovering addicts is like shopping in the dented can aisle. You know, you're not gonna, and like not to, but
What's the other one? 2 dead batteries can't start a car.
yes, exactly. And so in terms of it being detrimental, I think that you hit a really good point. And what I was thinking about as you were answering the question was, we go to meetings, right? And we start to skip meetings in certain cases, but also, and I did this in my early recovery relationship, we went to all of our meetings together. And we sat together in the meetings and we, you know, made eyes at each other.
You're like holding
Yes,
pinkies next to each
yes.
other.
And like, I would go to all the meetings that he spoke at, and he would come to all the meetings that I spoke at. And what happened was, when that relationship ended, I now had spaces in the meeting rooms that didn't feel safe to me. And so that was complete. I mean, to me, that's like the definition of detrimental. Like, those were spaces that I got clean to have that were safe, you know,
Right.
because like you were talking about things we didn't have in active addiction, like a safe space was, those two words didn't go next to each other. And so I definitely think it's detrimental in terms of how you involve them in your program. I mean, I remember my early recovery boyfriend like giving me advice on like my step work. And like saying things about like, oh, well, your sponsor should have suggested this. Like, and it just was not, it goes back to the very first thing we said, answering the very first question, where entering recovery is about forming your own identity, you know, and by that you have an identity of who you are sober with your sponsor, what you appear as in the rooms. You don't want to be half of a person in the rooms, because we didn't get clean to be anything less than, you know, authentically ourselves and wholly ourselves. And so I just, you know, there's a lot of positives of getting, there's not a lot of positive, there's a lot of physically appealing things into getting in a relationship in early recovery that I think we all crave. But in terms of long-term self-care, it's very detrimental. Just to reiterate on that word.
Yeah, no, I love that you say that. It's, you know, it's about keeping it separate, keeping your relationships and your recovery separate. Because once you mix the two together, things start to get really messy. And we're trying to avoid mess. We did mess in active addiction. Recovery is not about messiness anymore. So how do we tell people, or how do we refrain from rushing into a relationship? Like, what are some baby tips that we can give people?
Become friends first.
Yeah.
Obviously, setting healthy boundaries. When I got into my first recovery relationship, the person was not in recovery. And so that kind of brought up a whole other level of, you know, risks that I was taking.
Yes.
This person was actively drinking and using, and I was like, I'm fine. I'm strong enough to get through this. I'm going to save them.
We love to do that in early recovery.
Yep, love it. Can't save myself, but I'll save you.
Yes. Yes.
But, you know, and again, it put me right back into that dark place that I was in before I got sober. You know, and I didn't get sober to stay in that dark place.
Right.
You know, the whole you have to love yourself first before you can love anybody else is true.
It's true.
It's cliche, but the cliche sayings stick around for a reason.
Yep.
You know, I can't know what I want in a partner if I don't know what I want out of myself.
Right.
You know, because I had no idea who I was when I got sober at all. because I was a little mix of everyone and everything, you know, that I was around. And towards the end, I was around no one. You know, I was that empty shell of a person. I really didn't leave my house. So obviously then I didn't know how to be in a relationship either.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, 30 days sober, I'm good to go.
I wish that there was, it reminds me of trying to talk to a using addict like about getting clean. Like they just don't hear you and they just think that won't work for me. I'm not like you. I'll do it different. I had those thoughts. I remember sitting in treatment having those thoughts, looking at my rehab romance. We'll be different, you know? Like, and I wish that there was this magic phrase that I could say that was like, we've done it for you. It won't work. And how do you prevent rushing into it? Well, I think it can parallel your desire to get and stay clean, right? And there's a desperation there that the way that you were living, you were so vehemently desperate to get out of that and be a better version of yourself that you take that and you say, am I willing to go back to that darkness over this person? You know, you just have to really, and we have a saying in the rooms and in the treatment world, like play the tape out. Play the tape out. What happens if you get into a relationship with that person? Yes, he's cute. Yes, he's popular. Yes, you can go to all the meetings with him. You know how you react to negative feelings. I think us as addicts, we all know.
Oh, yeah.
We love to use a negative situation to get high. So you know, you've been through that. You've been through it before your active addiction. You've been through it during your active addiction. So nothing is going to be different now that you are in the recovering part of your addiction. You're going to have that same reaction, you know? And so in terms of not rushing, I mean, once I got my early recovery relationship out of my way, I remember thinking, I don't ever want to feel this way again.
Yeah.
Like, this hurts.
Yeah.
This hurts. And what's crazy, to go back to the parallel, is I remember thinking that when I was detoxing. Like, if I can just feel better from this, I won't ever do this to myself again. You know? And I remember thinking that during the breakup. Like, if I can just feel better, I promise I won't do this again.
Right.
Apparently that, like, self-desperation works dealing with myself.
Okay, we talked about refraining from rushing into a relationship, right? So far, we've only been talking about relationships. But what about casual dating, right? Is casual dating dangerous, off limits? What do we think?
Casual dating. No. That's my response to that. I have also tried that just to keep it on me. And I think, oh, that's the problem. I wanted more out of this person. And I try and convince myself that if this person just fulfills X, Y, and Z of my needs, then I'll be okay. And I won't get my feelings hurt. Personally, for me, that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. I think that is, we're lying to ourselves. If we think that we can, I'm lying to myself, if we can do something like that casually.
So I wouldn't say, you know, off limits. We like to break rules, right? As addicts, as alcoholics. You tell me not to do something, I'm going to do it. Because my goal is to prove you wrong, right? Because I'm different. It's not going to happen to me, and here's why. One amazing thing that my first sponsor told me is, you know, I can't tell you what to do. I can explain my experience to you. I can share that with you. You can do whatever you want. Just be willing to deal with your own consequences. You know, and even with casual dating, like when we first get sober, we don't know how to process emotion. For a lot of people, you know, they say that you mentally like stop maturing when you started using. You know, for me, I had my first drink at 11. So I had the emotional maturity of an 11-year-old. I didn't know how to handle anything.
Right.
So when that first, you know, heartbreak happened, it brought me right back to 11 years old. throwing a tantrum.
Yeah. What coping skills do we have at 11?
None. One thing that working in the field and being in recovery myself has taught me, I work a program of AA. So in the book, it talks about we drink essentially because we like the effect produced by alcohol, right? It's a feeling. When I get sober, I have this hole, right? And I'm searching and I'm grabbing for anything that's going to produce a feeling. And that's where like the cross addictions come in. This person's giving me attention. That's a feeling. I go to the gym. That's a feeling, the brain chemicals. So all of these things, we have to be really careful in early recovery to practice everyone's favorite B word, balance.
Now, I will say that as long as you're casually dating and you're just dating, and dating doesn't mean something else, I think at a certain point in your early recovery, if you come to that realization of yourself, like, I'm interested in testing the waters to see how I feel, and know that you're going into it as a test and not as a potential romantic partner, I think it's okay to kind of like exercise that. It's kind of like exposure therapy. Practicing exposure therapy on yourself. It's something that I did at 6 months sober. I waited 6 months before I actually went on, a real date with anybody, and I kept it about friends and fellowship and, flirting here or there. We're in early recovery. We can't control ourselves. That's going to happen. But once I felt strong enough on the inside to take it to another level of trying to, grow as a person, I went on a couple of dates. Casual dates to see how I felt about it, Sometimes I even chose someone that I truly had no romantic interest in just to make sure I didn't take it to another level. But for me, I think that was really helpful to identify like what's good, what's bad. And at the end of the day, I had never been on a real romantic date anyway. I mean, I got sober when I was 21. What did I know about real dating? I knew nothing. So
I didn't even know my type.
Exactly. What do we know? You know so little about yourself in early recovery. I mean, I love to say, 1 year sober, Alyssa, was like a world of a difference of the person I am today at 11 years sober. I don't even recognize that person anymore. And when you have a year sober, you're like, wow, I have a year sober. Now I have 11 years. I'm like, oh my God, a year was nothing. It was nothing. Yep. So just be prepared if you're on the recovery journey to know that you still have so much to learn about yourself. You have so many layers to peel back, and don't pigeonhole yourself into something or think this is my identity. This is who I love. It's like being 15 years old and being obsessed with your significant other, thinking you're going to marry that person. You're not going to marry that person. Wait till you're like 25, 30 years old. Maybe then you're finding the right person. But when is it the right time to relay that you're in recovery with your partner if they're not in recovery? That's an interesting one.
I will go first. I tried a lot of different tactics with this. I would try to keep it from them for as long as possible. Until it came to like meeting up, and they'd be like, oh, do you want to meet at a bar? And I would just casually be like, can we get coffee? Something like that. And then as I grew in my recovery and I got more clean time, I just told them. Because it was as commonplace as, hi, my name is Abby, I have a dog and 2 cats, and I'm in recovery. Like, it was just who I am, and there was no way around it, because it's not that being an addict is my whole personality, but it is something that is not, I can't just shelf it, so I let them know off the bat, this is who I am. Because if a potential partner has a problem with me being in recovery or not being able to use with me or drink with me, then we're not going to mesh.
Right.
We're not. I have gone on dates with men who drank at the dinner table, which was fine, and then realized at the end of the dinner that they were feeling a certain type of way. They were now intoxicated, and I was sober. And I wasn't enjoying that experience.
Right.
Not that I felt like it threatened my recovery, but that I was just like, this is lame. And so I found that by being honest, it was just, it wasted, I found that by being honest, it saved everyone a lot of time. And it really just weeded out the ones that weren't for me.
Right.
That's my experience. I mean, around 6-7 months clean, I stopped being ashamed of being an addict. And I started sort of being like, hey, I was a drug user and now I'm not doing drugs anymore. Let me tell you how I did it. And so, like, because I was so thrilled that I wasn't doing that anymore. I wanted other people to know that it existed. But I sort of, I relayed that into my dating life because, I mean, otherwise, like, what if you don't like that about me?
Right.
You know?
You have to give them the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Too.
I have to give them the opportunity. Absolutely. And so it just became like, it just became something that like they had to know off the bat. And especially because even in doing that, you're talking about exposure therapy, like it helped me not feel ashamed of it, you know, because it reminded me that I have other things to offer to you than just being like a fun drinking buddy. And things like that. It like telling someone like, hey, I'm in recovery, so I don't do X, Y, and Z, like really made me feel like, but let me show you what else I can offer you as a partner. Like it really gave me a sense of a sense of having something to offer to a relationship. I don't know if that's like very extreme, but that's what it did for me. I love telling people I'm in recovery.
No, I mean, I completely agree with you. You know, in the beginning, I tried to play it off as well that I just don't want to drink tonight or, you know, I'm good. But then I started to get feelings, you know, for him, her, whoever. And then it put me right back in that dark place, you know, when they were like, oh, yeah, can't do that. You know, if you can't accept that part of me, then you can't accept all of me.
Yeah.
You know, and same thing, like it is a part of who I am. It is a huge part of who I am. You know, it's not like my whole identity either, but if I'm not, you know, in recovery, if I'm not taking care of myself, if I'm not doing all of that, then I'm not going to be here. You know, so I think telling right off the bat is the best way to go, you know, because think about it, I'm just keeping a secret.
Yeah.
If I don't tell you, that's selfish, right? Because you said it, I'm taking that option away from them.
Yep.
Right? And I didn't get sober to continue to be selfish. So I have to give them that opportunity to make their own decision. You know, are you willing to commit to someone who doesn't drink or use drugs? You know, so
I would also just like to circle back to the question that was, how do we know when we're ready to start dating? You're ready to start dating when you can tell someone, hey, I'm in recovery, and not feel like you have to lie about it to get someone to like you. I think that is a huge telltale sign that you might be ready to date.
Yeah.
When you can share, like, this is who I am. This is the lifestyle I lead. Do you want to live this lifestyle with me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, depending on where you are, like obviously right now we're based out of Florida, which is, you know, especially this area is the recovery capital of the world. People in recovery, we got a vibe.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're around a normie, they probably already know based on the answers you're providing. You know, if you're a transplant, they know you're not from that area. The next question they might ask you, oh, did you move down here for college? So what's the next thing that you're going to say? No, I came here for rehab. Or are you going to come up with a lie about how you got a college degree that you don't have? It's a very uncomfortable place to be. And secrets keep you sick, exactly like you're saying. Why go into it with a lie? In today's day and age and the work that we've done to destigmatize addiction and be so positive about recovery, wear it loud and proud, you know? And if they got a problem, with it, they can kick rocks because there's plenty of fish in the sea. And there are plenty of people that are not in recovery that support people in recovery. Maybe they have a loved one that experienced it. Maybe they had a sibling that passed away. You don't know what type of bonds that could actually develop. And don't start your relationships off on lies. That's not a good way to start a relationship in any way, shape, or form. So what are some tips for helping create and maintain a healthy relationship while in recovery? So we're past the whole, don't date. Now it's okay to date, right? So what are some things or advice we want to give people to make sure it stays healthy and you stay true to yourself? I think we've actually kind of already been covering it, but
You definitely touched on it, in the beginning. Having your programs, if that person is in recovery, having your programs separate. Because let's say I'm fighting with my partner and I'm now in a bad mood and I go to a meeting with them, I can't show. You could. I wouldn't
really awkward.
share. Yeah. I wouldn't share about that.
Yeah.
Because they're sitting right next to me. Maybe their friends are in the room too, and that puts everybody in kind of that awkward, uncomfortable position. I work my program with my sponsor, you work yours with yours. And that's been, the best way that I've found. Because I've seen those ones making the googly eyes at each other in meetings, and it's distracting.
Yes.
For
Makes you sick.
everyone.
You're like,
It's not
"Oh."
just distracting for them.
Yeah.
I see them and I'm like, ugh. I remember that.
Yes.
The trauma bond.
Trauma bond.
Yes. But no, it's not the place, and it's really easy to get tied up in that. In having that support system of friends to be like, hey, you haven't been to a meeting in like a week. What's going on? I haven't talked to you in, I don't know, couple weeks. So, having that support system, building healthy boundaries, balance, all the great answers.
Boundaries and balance.
The two B's. But yeah, and it takes time. It's never perfect. We're never perfect. We're going to mess up. There have been times where I'm like, not going to go to that meeting tonight because, I really want to go see this movie and it's a date and it has been planned. It's not a regular occurrence though.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, my recovery is the most important thing in my life. Because without it, I have nothing.
Absolutely.
The secret to the success of my relationship with my normie boyfriend. For those who don't know, normie is not an addict. We call them normal, but LOL. Is communication. I do not
Preach.
shocking. I do not know how to communicate. I did not. I knew how to get high. I knew how to manipulate. I knew how to lie and steal and cheat, but I did not know how to communicate to you how I felt, why I felt that way, and what happened, And it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning about having healthy friendships. I had friends teach me and show me. We learned together how to do that, how to have these healthy verbal exchange of, if we were in a disagreement or they upset me or I upset them, we learned to communicate that. And so when I first got into this relationship with my now boyfriend, my favorite thing to do was to throw a temper tantrum and run away and play victim. Like, how could he do that to me? And I strangely met a man with a lot of patience, but also, honestly, a lot of self-worth, because he did not let me act a certain way. He set boundaries and said, that won't stand. And we need to talk about this. And so I would tell him, you did this and I feel hurt. I feel jealous. I feel insecure. And once I learned to communicate that to him, he could respond appropriately. He could respond and explain himself. Like, that's not what I meant, And also, on top of communication, boundaries. Beautiful, beautiful boundaries. When I met my boyfriend, I was established in my living situation. I was established in my professional life. That makes me sound very important. I had a very solid recovery. I had a sponsor that I did work with. I had a support group. I had my stuff together. And so when I met him, there was a boundary that if he was there or not, what I had, I had. And he couldn't take that from me. And I genuinely think that that is something very healthy to build upon,
Right.
you know? And I had to learn with him that thanks to all of the early recovery relationships and all of the toxic relationships, pre and post active using, he was not there to hurt me. Like, I learned to trust him, which was petrifying.
Yeah.
Petrifying. Like, I was so afraid. And that goes back to, like, I need to communicate that I'm petrified right now because I think you're on Instagram liking someone's pictures. And he's like, I'm looking at videos of dogs. You know, like, I needed to communicate that. And so trust, communication, and also, at least for me, like, I just accepted him for who he was. We talked a lot about, like, I can't save myself, I'll save you, or trying to paint someone a different color. Like, I found a partner who I was not obsessed with changing.
Right.
Or, you know, I like them. They would be perfect if just X, Y, and Z. You know, I don't do that with him. I see him for who he is. I tolerate the things that need to be tolerated, you know, but I found qualities, like all of the important qualities and all of the standards that I set, like he meets them.
Yeah.
And I believed that I was worth having them, you know, but I found a partner that I believed was genuinely attracted to me, which was shocking. Shocking. Also important. Didn't have to question that.
Well, you had that unconditional trust, so you believed
Yes.
him when he said it.
Yes, exactly.
Love that for you.
Because I believed that he wasn't, I believed his actions.
Yeah.
You know, I believed that he wasn't shady or manipulating me, and he wasn't trying to get it. He didn't need anything that I had, and I didn't need anything that he had. You know, like, we wanted each other emotionally, and I think that that's a big difference. That
Right.
like, in a lot of relationships, it was like, I don't have a car, can you drive me to the meetings? We should totally date now, you know, like things like I did date a man for that. He also used to drive me to work, so it was a very useful relationship. But no, like, so exactly, I unconditionally learned to trust him, like that vulnerability.
I feel like we've covered a lot of really amazing things. I'm feeling the love in the room. I'm ready for Valentine's Day this year. Do you guys want to add any other advice, tips, tricks, sobriety comments, anything at all before we wrap it up?
So one thing that was told to me and that I have done in my current relationship, doing a fourth step on your relationship.
Oof.
Yeah. Again, we're not perfect, you know. Resentments do creep up. There are things, and if you've ever been in, you know, a long-term relationship, things come up,
Yep.
right? That it's like, oh, that was cute in the beginning. It's 4.5 years later. You know, so being able to work through those, because if we don't, we all know what resentments do. It could ruin the relationship. And it's uncomfortable, you know. I don't think any fourth step is ever fun. But it gives you a whole different perspective, you know. And I get to see, what am I doing to this person? You know, because there's little things about me that I know irritate them. Do I change them? We're working on it. Little by little. Progress, not perfection.
So one takeaway, if anybody hears anything, is that, and this applies to getting clean, but believe that you are worth a healthy and loving relationship. And the reality is just a healthy and loving relationship is probably not going to happen when you have 6 weeks clean.
Right.
Believe that you are worthy. Find some standards and stick to them, you know, and know that you are allowed to have standards. You are allowed to have boundaries. And if a partner presents themselves and they are asking you to lower your standards or break those boundaries, then they're not the partner for you. I promise that the partner that is for you and the healthy relationship that is waiting for you is not going to ask you to do those things. So, you know, tips on recovery, tips on sobriety, tips on love in recovery is you do not know how to love anyone else until you love yourself. And you love yourself by having standards, having self-worth, not depending on outside sources for that, which is the nature of our addiction. Be safe, be gentle with yourself. And when you learn to treat yourself that way, other people will emulate that.
Doesn't matter if you were homeless 2 months ago.
Nope.
You still deserve the world. So do not keep your standards low. Keep them real high, ladies and gentlemen. You deserve the best and the most out of life. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It was so nice meeting you, Ashley, and thank you so much for Abby for joining us again.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Remember that growth and recovery are possible, and it can all start today. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Banyan Treatment Centers, and make sure you're subscribing for notifications of new episodes. And please don't forget to leave us a review. If you or someone you know are struggling, call us today at 888-515-7706. Thanks for joining us today on the Banyan Podcast.